Shelli, welcome back to another segment in our insurance series.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I thought we could talk a little bit about how to read one of these trade contractor insurance policies. On the outside in, it just seems like it's super complicated. I'm assuming as a trade contractor, I should at least make an attempt to do it. And do you have any advice on how to go about that?
For sure. So the first thing to understand is that a policy is a contract.
Okay.
It's a contract. And you've done the consideration by paying a premium and they're agreeing. So it's a actual risk transfer. So when we talk about risk management, a policy is a contract and it's one of the forms of risk management. So, it is the transfer. I've decided that I'm going to pay a premium. Therefore, I'm transferring $1 million of my risk to the insurance carrier. There's many ways to avoid risk. But with the insurance policy actually being the least effective and most expensive most of the time, which is ironic, right? It sounds a little funny coming out of an insurance agent.
Risk management specialist.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a risk manager first. So, because it's basically just assuming something's going to happen and I don't want to deal with it. I mean, honestly, right? Because there are many other ways. Now, thinking about that, there are many other ways to avoid risk. And if you do those things, then your insurance will cost less because you are doing other things to avoid the risk. As far as reading the policy, they are complicated and it says one thing here and then another, then later in the policy, it contradicts that and some things can be contradicted 3 or 4 times. So it's very complicated, but yeah. We always tell everybody, here's your policy. Please read it and let us know if you have any questions. And that's our worst nightmare, to be honest, is when somebody reads the policy because they glom on to one little section and think that's the holy grail, and they don't realize that there's another portion of it that that we've done. Goes back to what we talked about in the original segment, is that base policy is the same policy that's used for an apartment, gas station, or a contractor. So then the following forms that are attached to the base policy are the things that modify it. Okay. So far as the base policy, there's specific sections to it, which are the declarations, which is the front page that explains, who is insured, what the premium is, what the policy term is. And then we call it DICE. So that's the declaration. And then there's the insuring agreements. So that explains, we're going to do this. We're going to defend you. We agreed for the amount of money you're paying us. We're going to defend you for this type language. Okay. And then there's the conditions. That's, you're going to pay us. We're going to audit you. You have other insurance. So that's going to go first before us. So that prevents the buying multiple policies and double indemnifying. So that's something that maybe we'll get into more in a later section, but is very important. They have the right to examine your books, things like that. So those are the conditions. And duties in the event of loss, which is very important, because if you don't know what your duties are in the event of loss, then you quite honestly could beat yourself out of coverage by not following the rules.
Okay.
So that's extremely important. If you don't read anything else in there, that's the one thing you should read.
Okay.
And then there's the exclusions that are built into the base general liability policy, which are auto liability, workers' comp, pollution, builder's risk, because it's your own property. You can't pay a third party for your own property. Those sorts of things that you are specialty and you purchase otherwise, because general liability is the catch-all. That's the base policy. Then there are the exclusions that are attached that then will contradict things in there, because either we're adding coverage back or we're taking it away. But then there's the big granddaddy that nobody talks about, which is the definitions. Within the definitions, which is in the base policy at the very end, in addition to the duties in the event of loss, you want to read those definitions because the devil's in the details. And that's where it talks about what is contractual liability, what is an occurrence, those sorts of things. And so when you're reading the policy, it has defined terms all throughout it. And if you haven't read the definitions, then truly it shouldn't make any sense.
Right.
Because they're talking about those definitions. So those are very important. And then there's the attached forms. And as they trump each other. So the latest ones at the end are the ones that apply. So if something's excluded here, it could be give back. And so as they get later, they're taking the responsibility. So what we do as agents, and the most effective way to actually analyze and read a policy is to start at the end. You take your base policy, which is usually 16 pages, and take all the forms that are attached to it, start at the very end, because as they grow in the policy, they're trumping. So the last one rules, And then you start at the end and go back, and it'll say, I'm amending, deleting, adding to a specific section. It'll name it just like a contract section, 1.AB. Then go to your base policy. That's the 16 pages, and cross it out if it's deleted or whatever. And then you can read your policy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to do that, though. I don't know very many people that actually do that.
Let me ask you this. I'm out building homes, or I'm hanging drywall, or I'm whatever my specialty is. This is not my world.
Right.
I hire an agent are they bound either by law or a code of ethics that they're supposed to know my policy top to bottom and explain it to me with a certain amount of diligence? And is there any accountability there when push comes to shove and I end up in court somehow?
Yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. Unfortunately, it really doesn't anymore. It's become, unfortunately, you have your accountant, your attorney, your insurance person, and people shop a lot harder for their accountant and their attorney. And then they just use whoever for their insurance, their street corner guy, and they don't go look. I call it, don't go to a gas station for a haircut, right? Get to the specialist who knows that kind of business so that they're working for you. There's too many agents that just get a questionnaire filled out, they send it to the carrier, they get a quote, they have it signed off, and there's no discussion that happens. They aren't explaining anything. So yes, the code of ethics should be, and the expectation is we're basically like a doctor. You're coming to us as a patient with your situation, your symptoms, your business, and we're supposed to diagnose it. And maybe you're okay with bigger deductibles or okay with an exclusion for this, and you understand that you're actually self-insuring that aspect of it, and you're okay with it, but you need to have the discussion about it. And it's gotten lost. Anymore, you can take a 1-week class and sit for a test, and you can compete with me. I have 38 years doing this. This only, contractors only, right? And somebody 2 weeks can basically end up with a license and compete with me. It's absurd.
Wouldn't every agent in Washington State at least be bound to explain all the exclusions in my policy?
We're supposed to. I mean, there's nothing that says you have to. It's not, it's assumed. Okay. It's just like there's nothing that says, doctor, you have to explain every little thing to your patient, but you have that expectation because they're the specialist.
So it sounds like the advice to wrap up this segment would really be for trade contractors to at least have a handful of questions to ask. Say, what are my exclusions? Where am I hanging? This is, do you really understand my business? And am I covered? Right. And what else might I need to look at?
Yeah. And most people don't realize is that questionnaire is everything. So when that's being filled out, if you say, I don't dig trenches or I don't go above 3 stories and you're going to do a 4-story something, you've warranted you don't do that. All those applications have a little thing at the bottom saying this, you're certifying whatever, right? And you sign it. Yeah. So you've said you don't do those things. So if you do those things, you've violated that contract. That's part of the contract, right? So if you should know. I mean, sometimes I even write out, hey, these are your specific parameters, your box of what you're able to do. If you are outside of that box, you need to call me, and then I'll go for an exception. Or maybe we need to write a separate policy for that deal, that kind of thing. But you should know.
Or walk away.
Right, or walk away.
Don't do it.
It's the guy that wants to go build a condo and all he's ever done is remodeling. Yeah. We got a lot of that after the economy crashed. The banks were trying to get anybody to go put lipstick and rouge on projects just to get them sold, and they were going after anybody who'd do it, and telling them, oh, it'll be fine. And we're going to pay you $5,000 to fix this thing, and they didn't understand that by doing that $5,000 lipstick and rouge
at the very end,
you will be responsible for the whole thing, and you weren't paid enough. And the insurance companies aren't interested because they're only going to get premium for $5,000 worth of work because the premiums are based on production and they bought the farm. So there's exclusions on there for that.
Once again, amazing information. Thank you.
Thank you.